Okay, right. So today, guys, as you can see from the screen, our objective is to be able to solve word problems involving percentages of amounts. And we have three stages. Stage one is we're going to find 10%, 5%, 1%, or 2% of any given number. Stage two is we're going to use stage one to find any percentage of any number. And then stage three is we're going to use the first two stages, what we've learned in the first two stages, to then apply that to word problems. Okay, so each stage relies on the previous one. So in other words, in order to fully understand stage three, we have to make sure we're focusing on stage two. And to make sure that we understand stage two, we need to make sure we fully understand stage one. Okay, we know how this works because you'll do something very similar in school. Okay, right, so let's start off by finding 10%, 5%, 1%, and 2% of any number. Right, so we've got a number on the screen. You can see it. It's 300. And all we're going to do is talk about how would we be able to find 10%, 5%, 1%, and 2% of that number quite quickly. And the reason this is very useful is because once we've found 10%, 5%, 1%, and 2%, we can then go and find any percentage of that number, right? So we always start off by first finding 10%. How do we find 10% of any number? We simply divide that number by 10. Okay, so I need to divide 300 by 10 in order to find 10%. Now, 300 divided by 10 is 30. But if you have trouble with that, remember to divide by 10, all we need to do is put a decimal point at the end. And remember, this works for any number. I'm going to put a decimal point at the end. To divide it by 10, we move it once to the left. So our number gets smaller, doesn't it? It becomes 30.0. And we know that 30.0 is exactly the same as 30. Okay, so I'm not going to write 30.0 down. I'm just going to write 30 down. Okay, it means the same thing. So let's write 30 down. So we know what 10% is. Okay, 10% of 300 is 30. Okay, now we're going to find 5%. Now this is the bit where you really need to make sure you're listening very, very carefully, because once you know how to do this bit, that's it for percentages, okay? Because this is the awkward bit. This is the bit that confuses some people, okay? We've got to figure out the relationship between 10% and 5%, okay? Now the relationship between 10% and 5% is, well, 10% is double 5%. Or what we could say instead is 5% is half of 10%. They mean the same thing, don't they? Okay, so 5% is half of 10%. So in order to find out the value of 5%, I just need to half 30. That's all I need to do. If I half 30, I get 5%. Let me know in the chat box, guys, what's half of 30? Let me know. Remember, half of 30 just means 30 divided by 2. Perfect Ava, perfect Scarlett, perfect Annabelle, perfect Alexa, perfect Hayden, perfect Jordan. This is brilliant, guys. Very, very good. Perfect Gosima. Yes, so you're correct. Half of 30 is 15. So now, through not so much work, I know what 5% of 300 is. So I know what 10% is, and I know what 5% is. So now we're going to find out what 1% is. And again, I'm going to use 10% to help me. Let's think about the relationship between 10% and 1%. What can I do to 10% to arrive at 1%? What could I do? Who's going to volunteer? Let's do a hands up. Who can tell me? What's the relationship between 10% and 1%? Let's go for Scarlett. Scarlett, tell me, what's the relationship between them?
10% and 1%. 10% is just 10 times 1. So you divide 30 by 10, which would be 3. So 1% of 300 is 3.
Perfect. Very good explanation. Yes, 10% divided by 10 is 1%. So we just need to do 30 divided by 10. So 30 divided by 10. And if you don't know how to do 30 divided by 10, we can use a decimal point method, can't we? We'll put a decimal point at the end. Let me clear this off my screen. 2 seconds. Okay, so I put a decimal point at the end of 30. I move it once to the left what would it read? It would read 3.0, wouldn't it? Which is the same as saying 3. So I know that 1% of 300 is 3. And now finally, we're going to find 2%. So we need to establish a relationship between 1% and 2%. And it's never adding. We don't say we add 1% because we're talking about proportions, which means we need to multiply or divide, okay? So let's go to Ava. Ava, what's the relationship?
1% is just times by 2 to get 2%.
And therefore, what would 2% of 300 be?
6.
Perfect! Amazing, guys. You are switched on. 2% would be 6 because, like Ava said, 1% multiplied by 2 gives us 2%. So we just need to do 3 multiplied by 2, okay? And then we're going to get 6. So look what I have on my screen here, guys. I found 10%, 5%, 1%, and 2% of 300. And although it might have felt it took a little while, because obviously we've spoken about it in depth, it doesn't take too long, okay? It's only taken us some time because we've really spoken about it. But with more practice, we can do this really, really quickly. So it really is a quick and efficient way of finding percentages of amounts, isn't it, right? So your turn, guys, all by yourself. I'm going to give you a new number on the screen. Can you let me know in the chat box what 10%, 5%, 1%, and 2% is of this number? Coming up right now. 240. Give that a go, guys. See if you can do it in 1 minute. Okay, 10 seconds, guys. I can see some really good answers. And remember, if you do go a bit wrong, do not worry about it, okay? We're practicing. Shall we go through it? Let's go through it. Okay, so let's start off by finding 10% of 240. Now remember our special trick, which is in order to find 10%, we divide a number by 10. It's simple as that, guys, right? So we're going to divide 240 by 10, and remember, to divide a number by 10, we put a decimal point at the end and move it once to the left. So let's drag it to the left. It says 24.0, which we know is the same as 24. So I'm going to put that down as 10%. 10% must be 24. Now remember what we said earlier, and that is that 5% is half of 10%. So to find the value of 5%, I need to halve 24. So 24 divided by 2. What does that give me? That gives me 12. Okay. Then to find 1%, okay, things are going to get a bit tricky here, aren't they? Okay, so let's talk about this really carefully. To find 1%, we need to do 10% divided by 10. Now we know 10% is 24, so we need to divide 24 by 10. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Any volunteers? What's 24 divided by 10? Let's go to Annabelle. Annabelle, what's 24 divided by 10?
24 divided by 10 is 2.4.
How do you know, Annabelle?
Because if you do a decimal point from the end and you move it to the left one, it will be 2.4.
Amazing. Fantastic. And finally, let's go to Hayden. Hayden, what do you reckon 2% of 240 is and why?
I think I think 2% would be 7.2. 7.2.
Did you say 2% is 7.2?
Yeah.
That's really clever because that's 3%. So I know that you know what you're doing, but that's 3%. So you've added one too many. So take a look at 1%. If 1% is 2.4, what do we need to do to 2.4 to get to 2%? How do we get from 1% to 2%?
You gotta add
No,
2.4 to 2.4.
okay, yeah. But so we do 2.4 times 2. What's that going to be?
4.8.
Yes, very good. And I actually, even though the 7.2 wasn't correct, I like that answer because that's 3%, which means you're doing the right process. That's really, really good. Okay, so let's just clarify, guys. So 2% is 1% times 2. So we need to get 2.4 and multiply it by 2. Okay, so 4.8 would be our answer. Look at that, guys. Finding 2% of 240 sounds very difficult at first, but when we use a process like this, it becomes really straightforward, doesn't it? Okay, so we're still on stage 1, guys, but we've got one more question left. So, when I say one more question, I mean one more question in this stage, right? So, for the final time, guys, can you... Ooh, it's a smaller number, so things might be a bit tricky here, but give it a go, guys. You've got this. Okay, 20 seconds. Oh, Izzy, brilliant. I love that you can send messages. It's fantastic. And what's even better is your answer is brilliant. Very, very good. Or your answers are brilliant. Well done, Gesima. Well done, Ava. Well done, Annabelle. Guys, you're not going to have any issues with stage 3. Fantastic, Alexa. Brilliant. Jordan, fantastic. Thanks for your answer, Hayden. All right, shall we go through it? Let's go through it. So, mostly correct. There's a couple of incorrect answers. If you find out once we've gone through this that you weren't correct, do not worry. Okay, you're doing very well. Just keep practicing. Okay, so how about I don't say anything? Let's rely on you guys. Let's see if we can get through it without me saying anything at all. So let's start off with Ari and Oki. Right, talk me through 10%, please, Ari and or Oki.
So for the first one, you have to do 44 divided by 10. 10. No, not divided by, you have to do
Perfect.
10% of
Yeah, that's right.
44. And then you have to put a decimal point to move it one place to the left. And then you get 4.4.
Wow. Fantastic. What an explanation. What a brilliant explanation. I love that I don't have to say anything. That's amazing. Fantastic. So as Ari and Oki said, just to find 10%, it's the same with any number. Decimal point at the end, once to the left. Let's just pause for a second, right? I'm going to ask you a little bit of maybe like a side challenge. I'm going to ask Ava, right? Ava, what happens if our number already has a decimal point in the middle of it? How would we find 10% then?
You'd put the decimal point one more place to the left.
Perfect. So this is why it's such a good rule, guys, because even if we already have a decimal point, that doesn't change a thing. We simply move that to the left, okay? So dividing by 10 is always getting our decimal point and moving it to the left. If it already has one, move it to the left. We've got a class of geniuses here, guys. All right, so we've got 4.4. Let's move on to 5%. Let's go to Jordan. Jordan, not only would I like to hear what you think 5% is, but how do you know you're correct?
So you have to half 10%, and which is 2.2. Yeah, and you know that because like if half of 4 is 2 and half of 4 is 2.
Amazing, fantastic. Yep, that's it. 5% is half of 10%, so we're going to halve 4.4. Okay, and of course we get 2.2. That's brilliant. All right, so we're moving on now to 1%. The numbers are becoming a bit weird, aren't they? Because we're dealing with strictly with decimals at the moment. Let's ask. I'm only going to ask people that have their hands up yet, just because I don't want to pick on anyone that doesn't want to speak. Let's go to Gersima. All right, Gersima, what is 1% of 44 and how do you know?
1% of 44 is 0.44, and I know this because 10% of 44 is 4.4, so you have to move the dot to one more time to the left.
Very good. Very, 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 very impressive, guys. Of course. So we know what 10% is. 10% is 4.4. And like Gersima said, and like Ava said earlier, well, if we've already got a decimal point, we're just going to move it once again to the left. And that's the number we arrive at. We arrive at 0.44 or 0.44, okay? Which leads us on to our final question of stage 1, which is what is 2% of 44? Let's go for Alexa.
It's 88 because if you do 0.44 times 2, it'll equal to 0.88.
Fantastic. 0.88. That's really, really good, guys. And I love your explanations. So let me just quickly write that down. Then I'm going to say something just to pick up on a couple of things. You've all been brilliant, but just be careful the way we read numbers, guys. So it's going to sound incredibly pedantic and picky, but a few of us, when we're reading these numbers, when we read decimal numbers, we don't read it the way we read regular numbers. So we're not going to say like 0.44 or 0.88. We're going to say 0.44 and 0.88, okay? Only because the value changes, doesn't it? We don't have 44, we have tenths and hundredths. So it sounds a little bit picky, but that's just the world of maths, okay? But in terms of the actual answer, brilliant. Very, 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 very good, okay? So can you see, right? Imagine at the beginning of this lesson, and maybe you could already do this, but imagine at the beginning of the lesson, the question was something like, what is 2% of 44? That might seem bordering impossible, right? But this process shows us that actually it doesn't take too long to arrive at that answer, yeah? We know what the answer is. The answer is 0.88. All right, amazing, guys, fantastic. So I think we're ready for stage 2. Well, actually, I don't think we're ready. I know we're ready. So let's remind ourselves of stage 2. Stage 2 is to use stage 1, the stage that we just did, to find any percentage of any number. So at the moment, what we've been doing is finding 10%, 5%, 1%, and 2% of numbers. But of course, we want to be able to find any percentage of any number, okay? So things don't change that much. You'll be relieved to know that things pretty much stay the same, okay? So what I'll do is I'll go through this one really, really quickly, because we know how to do this. 10% of 400, we know is 40. 5% of 400, well, we know that's half, so that's going to be 20. 1% of 400, well, that's going to be 40 divided by 10, so 4. And 2% of 400, well, that's going to be 1% multiplied by 2, so 4 times 2, which is 8. Now, these numbers the numbers we've got on the screen are very, very useful. Okay. Let me ask Scarlett. All right, Scarlett, I want you to give me any 2-digit number, but for now, just in case anyone in this room is a little bit confused, let's not go large just yet. So just give me a 2-digit number, but try and go a bit smaller.
Okay. 67.
Let's go a bit smaller than that. Oh, Scarlett, you would do 67. Try and go smaller than that. Just for now, Scarlett. We'll go bigger in a minute, but just for now, let's go a bit smaller than that.
36. And can I say something?
Really quickly, Scarlett. Yeah.
So you know how 40 is 400 divided by 10?
Mm.
To find 1%, you can just do 400 divided by 40.
You could. There's not, yeah, and that's a good thing about maths, isn't it? There's always lots of different methods and processes to do things. So absolutely. All right. So Scarlett gave us a challenge, and that is 36%. We're going to find 36% of 400. Now, to find it, we're only going to use the information that we already have on the screen. Okay. So how am I going to do this? Right. I need to find 36%. Let me start off by finding 30%. I'm going to find 30% first, okay? And I know how to find 30% because I know what 10% is. 10% is 40. How am I going to get to 30% from 40? What would I do to 10% to get to 30%? Let me ask someone. Let me ask Thomas. Thomas, what can I do to 10% to change it into 30%? Okay, guys, make sure if your hand's up, you want to answer, yeah? Let's go to Hayden. Hayden, what can I do to 10% to get to 30%?
You minus 10.
Now, hold on. How am I going to get from 10% to 30%? What do I do to 10% to get to 30%?
You times it by 3.
Perfect. We multiply by 3. Fantastic. So we're going to multiply. If we multiply 10% by 3, we get 30%. So if I multiply 40 by 3, I'm going to get the value of 30%. So 40 multiplied by 3. Now, I reckon we can do that in our heads. 40 times 3, or 40 plus 40 plus 40. So what is 40 times 3? Well, that's going to be 120. Now remember, 30% is equal to 120. We now know this, okay? But we need to find 36%. So I need an additional 6%, okay? And have a look, guys. I've got 5% here, and I've got 1% here. If I combine those two, I get 6%, yeah? 5% plus 1% is 6%. So all I need to do is 20 plus 4. Yeah? Let me say that again. 5% is equal to 20. 1% is equal to 4. I'm looking for 6%. So I'm going to combine the two. 5% plus 1% is 6%. So 20 plus 4 gives me 6%. So what is 20 plus 4? We know the answer to that. 6% equals 24. Now look what I've got on the screen, guys. I know that 30% is equal to 120. I know that 6% is equal to 24. How am I going to get 36%? Combine the two of them together. 120 plus 24. That will give me 36%. So 120 plus 24 is 144. And that's our answer. That's 36% of 400. Okay? So all we're doing here is we're kind of getting our numbers, getting the data that we have, manipulating them so that they work in our favour. And honestly, there isn't a percentage that Scarlett couldn't have given to us that we couldn't have worked out. I know we started a bit smaller, so we want to go a bit larger. But for now, as we're getting into this, we started off with 36%. But as the lesson goes on, we're going to deal with larger percentages, okay? So you're doing really well. But now, can you tell me what is 35% of 400? So I'm going to put the numbers back on the screen. So 10% was 40, 5% was 20, 1% was 4. And 2% was 8. So let me know, guys, what would 35% be? It's pretty similar to the question Scarlett gave us. I do apologise for that. Let's have a look at your answers. Yes, Annabelle, brilliant. Yes, Scarlett, fantastic. Perfect, Hayden. Perfect, Alexa. Perfect, Ava. Perfect, Izzy. Perfect, Gasima. Guys, this is brilliant. This is very, very, very good. Just be careful. So the answer is not 140%. The answer is 140. Yeah, our answer is a number, not a percentage. So our answer is 140. Okay, well done, guys. I won't go through that because we've just went through 36%, but we will go through some more examples in a second. So, what is 21%? See how quickly you can do that. How are we going to use those numbers to help us? What is 21% of 400? That's super quick, Ava. Fantastic. Do not worry if you're confused. I'm going to go through it again in a minute, and we will get there, okay? I promise. Perfect, Gasima. Some of you are close. If you've answered and I've not said your name, take a look because you're really close. Perfect, Hayden. Perfect, Alexa. Perfect, Izzy. Perfect, Jordan. All right, if you're a bit confused, watch carefully. I'm going to go through it. So we want to find 21% of 400. How are we going to do that? Well, let's first find 20%. Okay, let's find 20% first. Okay, so how am I going to find 20%? Well, I can get 10% and multiply it by 2. Because 10% times 2 is 20. Yeah? So 40 times 2 is 80. So 20% must be 80. But we're not looking for 20%. We're looking for 21%. And look, it's already written for me. 1% is 4. So 1% is equal to 4. Now, I found out what 20% is. I found out what 1% is. I just need to combine the two. So 80 plus 4. And that gives me 84. Okay. Right. Let's move on. Can you tell me what is 70% of 400? Now the numbers have gone from the screen. I'll add them for you, but I reckon you probably don't even need those at the moment. But I'll add them for you anyway, just in case. So 10% was 40, 5% is 20, 1% is 4, 2% is 8. What must 70% be? How are you going to work this one out? Perfect, Alexa. Perfect, Gasima. Perfect, Jordan. Perfect, Ava. Perfect, Annabelle, very good. Perfect, Izzy. Perfect, Thomas. Perfect, Scarlett. This is brilliant. This is really, really good. Let me ask someone to help. Izzy, how do we know? Well, you're correct, but how do you know you're correct?
It's because I did 70. I did 40 times 7 and I got 280.
Very, very good. Exactly. And Izzy may have made it sound simple by saying, you know, all I did was I got 40 and multiplied by 7. But that's it. This is the point I'm making. To find any percentage of any amount, you really just have to do a bunch of easier questions rather than anything tough. Okay, so whilst it seems tough at first, again, like if your first question today was what is 21% of 400, that might seem tough, but all it takes is a little bit of working out, like the working out you've been doing, and we can quite quickly get onto our answer. Okay, right, so I'm happy that we can move on to stage 3. So let's forget this question because it's just the same thing again. Let's do stage 3, right? So stage 3 is we're going to use what we have learned in stage 1 and 2 to solve word problems. So stage 1 was where we found 10%, 5%, 1% and 2%. Stage 2 is where we found random percentage amounts like 35% and 21% and 70%. Now what we're going to do is use all of that working out to answer percentage word problems. However, I've got a challenge for you. This has got to be all you, okay? This is all you. So I'm not going to tell you what 10% is or 5% is or 1% is or 2% is. I need you to read the word problem and work it out all by yourself. And if it goes wrong, we will go through the answer, so don't worry if it goes wrong, okay? Just watch really carefully. So your first word problem, guys, is there are 320 students sitting in an assembly hall. 20% of the students leave early as they are going on a school trip. How many students leave early to attend the school trip? So give that a go and you'll hear from me again in about 35 seconds. That's amazing, Scarlett. Very good. Izzy, your speed is absolutely brilliant. Annabelle. Guys, you know what? Not only are your answers impressive, but your speed, amazing, Ava. Your speed is fantastic. Perfect, Jordan. Perfect, Gersima. Perfect, Hayden. This is fantastic, guys. Amazing. I'll be honest with you. I didn't expect the answers to come that quickly. This is really, really, really good. Really impressive. All right. Let me go to... Who's got their hands up? Let's go to... Annabelle. Okay, Annabelle, you are correct. How do you know you're correct?
Because if you work out 10% of 320, it's 32%. Because if you move the decimal...
Sorry, Annabelle. You're correct. So if we find 10% of 320, what's the answer?
32.
Good. Not 32%, 32. Fantastic. All right, so we've got 10%, 32. What do we do now?
Now you need to double 32 times 2 because it's asking for 20% and the answer would be 64.
Fantastic. That's really, really good, guys. And do you know what's really impressed me, actually? And even if you did write this down on paper, that's good. That's really, really good. But I can tell that some of you did that in your head, right? I'm not psychic, but I know because of the speed that you did it in. So that's really impressive. If you have to write it on paper, write it on paper. Who cares, okay? But I absolutely love the speed. Okay, next one. All right, this one's a little bit trickier. A business donates £140 across 3 different charities. 15% of the total donation goes to an animal charity. £59 is donated to a shelter charity. The rest of the donation goes to a children's charity. How much money is donated to the children's charity? Be careful, guys. Give that a go. Perfect guess, Emma. Very good. Perfect, Scarlett. Very good. Perfect, Ava. And well done, Ava, for putting the pound sign in. Very good. Perfect, Jordan. Very good. Again, the speed is ridiculously good. There's a couple of incorrect answers, but when you see in a minute that you're incorrect, please, please, please do not lose your confidence because you've been amazing, okay? Just put it down to one question that was a little bit tougher. And then you'll see what you did wrong, and then next time you won't do it wrong, okay? It's okay to get things wrong. Perfect. Izzy, that's correct. All right. I love that one of you has asked to work this out, to explain the working out. I'll have to work this one. Sorry, I'll have to show the working out to this one if that's okay. It's just for a couple that got it wrong. But please don't worry if you got it wrong. What I'd like you to do, if you did get it wrong, is just watch the process and try and figure out where it is you went wrong, okay? So, a business donates £140 across 3 different charities. Now, the first part of this question says 15% of the total donation, so £140, goes to an animal charity. So we need to find 15% of 140. So here's my £140. I'm going to find 15% of it. So what would 10% of £140 be? Well, 10% would be, again, we're moving that decimal point to the left, aren't we? It would be 14, or £14. Now we want to find 15%. We've found 10%, so I just need an additional 5%. And we know how to find 5%. It's half of 10%. So what's half of 14? 7. So 10% is 14, 5% is 7. If I combine the two, I get 15%. So 14 plus 7 gives me 15%. So 15% must be £21. So let's go back to the question before we go any further to make sure that we're doing this correctly. It says 15% of the total donation goes to an animal charity. Now, once I've read the question, I understand the context is that the money is being given out across different charities. So now, what I need to do is get my £21 and subtract it from £140 to see what's left. So 140 subtract £21, okay? What's that going to give us? That's going to give us £119. So that's what we've got left at the moment. But we've only done this first step of the question, haven't we? It says £59 is donated to a shelter charity. So there's no percentage question being asked here. We're explicitly told that £59 is donated. So we need to subtract that from what the business has left. They had £119 left. They've given away another £59. So we do 119 subtract 59, and that gives us £60. So now we've got £60 left. And the final part of the question says the rest of the donation, which we know there's only £60 left, goes to a children's charity. So £60 must go to the children's charity. Okay. Now, I'm really, really pleased. I'm really, really happy because that took me a little while to explain, but took you just a few seconds to get the answer. So that's absolutely amazing. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to leave it there. What I'd like you to do though, before you go, is very quickly in the chat box, can you give yourself a number out of 10? How do you feel this went? So 0 means you did not understand this at all. 10 means you're super confident. You're convinced that it doesn't matter what the question asks you. If it relates to percentages, you're going to get it correct. And of course, 5% means you're somewhere in the middle. So let me have a look at your numbers. Thank you, Oki and Ari. Thank you. Thank you, Hayden. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Ava. Thank you, Scarlett. Thank you, Izzy. I love the confidence, guys. Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you, Alexa. All right, amazing. Thank you so much for coming today, guys. And I really hope that you are able to attend tomorrow's online lesson. Okay, have a good evening. Bye, guys.